And you can't talk about climate without talking about water. They are two sides of the same coin.
89% of all the water consumption in the country is in agriculture. Agriculture solely depends on water, and 51% of India's population depends on it for livelihood.
So probably one of the best kept secrets of Indian agriculture is that the Indian farmer is typically the woman.
India is actually consuming 4 times its capacity of groundwater. The problem also is that it is invisible. By 2030, India will have a 50% gap between the supply and demand of water. That totals up to 570 billion cubic meters of water. Solving this problem requires us to bring the government, industry, and other stakeholders together. But at the center of it is really the communities, because they are at the front line, both of the problem and the solution. But how do you really engage communities to solving this problem? How do you solve this at scale? What are the enabling factors we need to find the solutions that are sustainable? To talk about this and more, we have with us Dr. Shraman in this episode of Decoding Impact. Dr. Shraman is the CEO of Hindustan Unilever Foundation and leads the strategic direction of the foundation. Shraman, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Rathish.
And tell us about the focus of the foundation overall. What all do you do there? What are your big priorities?
So our foundation predates the CSR era. So it was a voluntary setup that was made, and there was a lot of debate on what should the foundation focus on. Obviously, India is a large country, it's a complex country, you can't do everything.
Of course.
And after a lot of debate, one of the issues that people settled down was on water security. And this was still an era before water became so mainstream, but we could see that these were issues that were fairly significant. And when people of that time looked deeper into it, there was a call that, look, bulk of the water, 80-90% of all the fresh water is actually used in agriculture. And if we are really going to make a fundamental change, then we'll have to look on the agriculture side of it. So our scope was then sharpened to focus on rural India, where the water needs in agriculture, whether that could be moderated, whether societies could be helped be more water secure in the changing times.
Correct.
And I think that call made about 15 years ago turned out to be very wise, because as we've seen, issues have accentuated over the years. The broader discussion around climate has gone up so much. And you can't talk about climate without talking about water. They are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and I agree with you. 2 years ago at Sattva, we had the same conversation to say, what are some of the population scale challenges we have to solve? And we picked agriculture as an area, and immediately we realized water and agriculture is a significant part, because 89% of all the water consumption in the country is in agriculture. Agriculture solely depends on water, and 51% of India's population depends on it for livelihood. Centering on that, and given your work, Shraman, how do you see this intersection of water and agriculture actually, and water and livelihoods actually play together?
In multiple ways. And while we'll keep our conversation largely on India, this is true not just in India, but in many parts of the world. And in our immediate proximity, certainly in all of South Asia.
Correct.
So first and foremost, India's agriculture is a gamble on the monsoons. And it has been for many, many years. But with the advent of technology and so on, fundamentally our ability to extract groundwater,
Correct,
a lot started changing. So then you were not limited by when the rains would come. You could grow your crops. You could have water almost at on tap, and with your ability to go delve deeper, more powerful technologies, etc., kept on coming through. So this is one side of it. The other side of it is we are all aware of the migration from the villages to the cities.
correct.
And that's mainly of the able-bodied male. So probably one of the best kept secrets of Indian agriculture is that the Indian farmer is typically the woman.
Yeah.
And then you realize that a lot of the cropping activities, they're extremely water intensive, the water table keeps going down, and a realization even within the communities that this may not be sustainable beyond a time. And here to replenish the water reserves takes a lot longer.
Yeah.
Layer that with all the other uncertainties, vagaries of the monsoon, all the other issues that we have, and this is something which is really becoming big and huge. And in the cities, we may not feel it so much, but do remember your water is also being diverted from somewhere.
Yeah.
The case of Cape Town, a lot of people know.
Yeah.
But what you may not know is one very large capital city in the world has absolutely gone dry, and the president of the country has announced that if it doesn't rain in November, we are shifting the capital.
Wow.
And this is, we are talking about Iran and Tehran, second largest city in the Middle East and the whole of North Africa. It's nearer than we think.
Absolutely. I always read this fact that India is actually consuming 4 times its capacity of groundwater and is totally indiscriminate. But the problem also is that it is invisible. Like till the tap opens and the water comes, you're like, okay, everything is fine. Like there is no warning signal to tell you that now you are in the yellow zone, now you are in the near red zone. Because as long as it runs and till the apartments didn't run out of water, everybody complained that the shower water was not fast enough. That was the water problem we had.
That's a very powerful quote that I attribute to you ever since I heard you mention that. It's an invisible problem till it hits you.
Yeah.
And now that it's hit, especially hitting the better off, those who can afford to buy their way out of solutions. But every time you're buying your way out, it's water being diverted. And the one term I'd like to clarify early on is that we work around the area of water security, which is not exactly the same as water scarcity. So water security is the right kind of water at the right time in the right quantities.
Right.
So very often a flood situation might come, oh, there is so much of water, but that's also a problem. You're not water secure.
Correct.
A year like the one that we've just had, where the monsoons have been 6-7% above normal, looks nice. But too much of water in parts, and parts of India, large states like Bihar and even the Northeast, which remain dry. So the overall big figure and the national averages often mask a number of these truths that go along. So it's a complex issue.
And I think I want to unpack that water security a lot more. One, as you said, is the law of averages. The law of averages means it doesn't fit anybody. So Cherrapunji and Rajasthan probably on an average do better, but not by themselves. But the second part of it is the right quality at the right quantity. Maybe unpack that a little bit for me. And how do you experience water security?
In multiple ways. Okay, so right quality, right quantity, right time. All of it come in. Let's start with right time. And if we are going to talk about agriculture, India's agriculture is fundamentally around two agriculture seasons, the Kharif and the Rabi. Kharif has traditionally been rain-fed and the crops require more water and so on. Rains have to come in on time for you to be able to do the seeding on time. You don't want rains at the time of harvest. So and our monsoon season, which runs for 3.5 months, if the rains come towards the end when it's time to harvest your crop and they were not there in adequate quantities, you are done for. A delayed Kharif impacts the Rabi, which they are back to back. There's a very small gap between the Kharif harvesting and the Rabi sowing, and the chain reaction goes on. And if you have it in the right quantity, you can get a third crop, the summer crop, as Zaid as it is called in parts. But if you don't have it, you don't. You wait for the next monsoons. So there's a whole issue of timing, which is very fundamental and which is very critical. Let's look at quality. Many dimensions to quality. But the first and foremost of it is the issue of salinization. You can have water. But if that water is not fresh water, it's not suitable even for agriculture, let alone for other forms of consumption. Just a couple of days ago, I was reading about southern Bangladesh, which if you look on the map is where all the rivers are, where the Gangetic Delta is, regions around Khulna and Barishal. That's flush with water. If you were to fly over that region, it's water. But one of the biggest issues there is a water security issue there, because the salt water is being drawn in, and therefore even large tracts of land are being made unsuitable for agriculture. Same thing in India, in parts, and maybe we'll talk about the Punjab story a little more. So that's the whole issue about quality. And the quantity bit, we of course spoke about that it has to be it has to be regulated over a period that you can store it, use it. So it's there are many layers to this which need to be, and I've not even gone into the issue of drinking water for humans and cattle and those parts of it. That's a different subject.
And even under quality, there are so many other aspects.
So many other aspects.
And because it's also underlining the issue of the delicate balance that we have to hit. Because we are, like I often joke that we are engineers very good at positive reinforcement loops. We think that if something is good, just do more and more and more of it. But you always realize that, hey, it can't be at too much of it. It can't be too little. It can't be at the wrong time. It can't be the wrong type, and so on. So natural systems are a lot more delicate, and hence local engineering, working with local stakeholders becomes a lot more critical, because top-down solutions almost always never find that balance. The regional realities of water in India are so different, right? Some of it is shaped because of monsoons and ecology. Some of it is shaped because of the kind of work we do there. But you brought up Punjab, but can you just give me a sense of also the regional differences that you see when it comes to water security in India?
If you were to travel to Punjab, everything is lush, green, it's very verdant.
Right.
And you mentioned Rajasthan a short while back with reference to Cherrapunji. Isn't it strange that from a water stress point of view, Punjab is worse off than Rajasthan?
Yeah.
But short and long of it is, how much are you receiving and how much are you consuming?
Correct.
Very much like your, for salaried people, the income which comes into our accounts at the end of the month, that's what you're receiving. And is your outflow roughly balanced with that or not? Punjab is intuitively difficult to understand if you're just looking at it at the surface, but where is the greenery coming from? It's not from the famous 5 rivers or from the canals. It's largely by the groundwater which is being pumped up and every year deeper and deeper. So the groundwater reserves are plummeting sharply.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's also drawing in, therefore, the issue of salinization, the salt. There are parts where you see the salt coming through. And when you talk to the farmers, there are many of them wizened men who have lived through the Green Revolution, taken the benefit, but they actually worry about what will happen to our future generations. If you permit, I'll narrate a little story for you.
Please.
And this is not a recent story, this is straight out of the Mahabharata. So this is the time of the Great War. And on the 10th day, you have Bhishma Pitama, who's been fatally wounded, but you are aware that he had his choice, that he'll choose when he wishes to die. And he was on his bed of arrows. But even Bhishma Pitama can feel thirsty. Everyone ran with jugs of gold, with water and or diamond or whatever the precious things. So only Arjun, who understood what, because he was a great warrior, he's not going to have water out of that. And what does Arjun do? Takes his bow, shoots into the ground.
Yeah.
Water sprouts out. And Kurukshetra is right next to Punjab in today's state division. In the olden days, all was the Punjab region. Perhaps it was good that the Mahabharata is dated 5,000, 10,000 years back. If you look at the central groundwater reports, from year 2000 to 2020, every year, district of Kurukshetra, the groundwater level has gone down by 1 meter.
Right.
Today, in an action replay, maybe Arjun's arrow may not even have gone to the water table. So that's how acute the situation is.
Absolutely. And mirroring that also are parts of the south. For example, areas like Tanjavur have been rice baskets forever. Like the Chola kingdom, which is almost like about 1,000 years old, have thrived because of the rice baskets in Tanjore. And today, those areas are also water stressed.
Yes.
And so it is not just the case of areas which have traditionally been severely impacted, like I gave the example of Rajasthan. It's also places of abundance where it is just human usage that has sort of come in. And so that sort of brings me to the conversation on the communities that locally exist, because that is where the balance and the tension really plays out, because it's their livelihood versus their long-term benefits, etc. How have you looked at that work today, and what are some of the levers that you believe have had significant impact in engaging communities on this conversation and the dialogue on water?
Very often since we speak about water, think of water as our brand positioning, the single point that we talk about. But it often hides a number of other things which community members are very, very astute and aware of. And you cannot have a unidimensional solution.
Right.
So when you deal with the community, what is everyone's first interest, whether it's you or for me? We need food, we need to be secure, we want our children to be educated. So you have to make sure that they earn more money, which means they have to be more productive, that they get more out of their land, and that whatever they grow, it has a higher money value if they're selling it, or a consumption or a nutrient value if they are consuming it. That is the first one. Second is that something they can sustain over a period of time? Because any form of support or something can only be for a defined period of time. After that, it has to run on its own if the mechanism is working.
Right.
Third, is there something that they are trained and capable of doing? Once you start putting these together, then really you see how the grassroots level civil society organizations, how they are helping get this messaging through, getting the community together, particularly in most cases the women, because they are the most impacted.
Right.
How have you seen a picture or a photograph of a woman walking through a patch with a large matka? Makes for a beautiful picture or a beautiful painting. Seen a man do it? So there are huge, strong gender dimensions to it, and that is how the pain and the responsibility falls. So women are a lot more receptive, and they understand and appreciate it. And then comes the process of hand holding and supporting, tapping into a lot of wisdom which they already have, and supplementing it with what modern science or other good practices can be brought together, and merging it together into an idea that is theirs and they own.
And what role does data play in some of these conversations?
Huge. And remember, the community we are speaking to, they are not the ones who have been trained in statistics on national level data, everything. So this entire bit on data starts with the fundamentals. That why do you need to have data in the first place about anything? And just with the specific reference of water, and getting across the first principle of how much do you have and how much are you consuming. And that can be seen both in a stock sense or a flow sense, and a balance sheet sense or a P&L kind of sense. That what is in your village area, what are the places and sources of water?
Right.
How do you estimate it? There's a physical measurement calculation which goes in. So you have a sense of this is what I have. And if that is what you have, then that is what you have the ability to consume. How much will be replenished? So this part, entire bit, whichever it takes from water budgeting or maintaining a water balance, whichever of the techniques you use, once the principle gets in, I have been stunned at the degree of involvement, engagement with which the women drive it. So that makes a huge difference, at least at the micro level, that gets sorted out.
Right.
And that becomes a big thing. Tools that have worked, one of our partners we worked with was FES, Foundation for Ecological Security. They developed a wonderful water game, almost like a monopoly as you have, where the objective is to maximize your agricultural earnings over repeated cycles. And you have certain choices you make along the way. And very soon, it becomes that what helps you win in round one doesn't necessarily leave you with enough for round two and round three. And when you have a whole community watching when the game is being played, to see how the community starts putting pressure, hey, don't do this, it's going to affect. And then those are the moments that the insight truly gets sparked off. So there's a lot of creativity which has also gone into developing many of these, which are used extensively now. One of our current partners is called DSC out of Gujarat. They've been doing it, and we've been sending a number of other partners there to kind of pick out the nuances of how this entire water budgeting part works. Once you see that with numbers, it makes a huge difference. Purely as an aside, the state of Kerala and the state budget has also now started institutionalizing in certain pockets a government-based water budget over a larger geography. So the principle is catching on.
Interesting. There are two preconceived notions I've constantly heard from multiple stakeholders I've spoken to. One is farmers don't care about water as water savings because their livelihoods depends on it, so they are always short term, which again, like you rightly said, there is a tension and they recognize the tension. Two is don't talk about numbers to farmers because farmers don't get it. And especially rural women, they don't get it at all. So you will have to dump this down. And as you rightly said right now, these are matters of life and death for them, and this really impacts them, so they get it. But are there some specific aspects that they are truly able to relate to in their context in terms of data or numbers, etc.?
You have to translate it into the context of their lives.
Can you give me an example?
For example, it's a choice of cropping that you do. So first, stay with the same crop, but are there practices that you can adopt which consume less water
Right.
to give you the same output or a higher output? For example, SRI, system of rice intensification, being one.
Correct.
Nobody wants to be the first one to do it. So the principle of demonstration farm plots versus non-demonstration farms. So let them see it in their own locality and concept that it works.
Right.
Similarly, even if you're growing sugarcane,
Right.
there are methods of how you plant and how you sow, which makes a difference on what you are consuming.
Correct.
Alternate wetting and drying. Every solution comes with its limitations.
Of course.
And so you have to figure out which one fits a particular locality and circumstances and season and so on. Some are long duration, some are short duration and so on. But you need to demonstrate it.
Yeah.
So the issue of having a lead farmer, somebody who's willing to take that chance, do it on our demonstration plot, which others can view and say, hey, it actually works. So you have to give the proof of concept. And the way to lead it is not so much from this is the water you are saving, that is a side effect. But because of the water you are saving, you are able to either get a better crop through in the next season, or through this, not only are you saving water, but you are also cultivating more.
Right.
So this is when you're sticking to the same crop. The more difficult solution is when you are looking at changing or moderating some of the crops that you choose to grow. So whether it is intercropping, where you're doing different crops at a particular time, differentiating between what is for own consumption and what is not, which is where you might want to look at a little bit of horticulture and so on, which leads to more towards nutrition security. That's the other dimension which goes in. I mean, we've had cases, for example, of the 1 acre model in Marathwada, where in 1 acre you grow almost everything your family needs and you're nutritionally secure. Your soil is also gets rejuvenated through the right kind of nutrients appropriately. Or bigger fundamental shifts like changing over to a crop which is more suitable for that particular terrain. But then you have to make sure that if it's for the market, that you also are able to see the chain through right to the right through to the market.
Of course.
So that the economics remain sustainable, whether it is through capacitating FPOs in that region, or there are any other things that you are doing. So, for example, a lot of the work on millets, etc., that requires the chain to also fall into place. But at the end of the day, it has to meet all the criteria of positive economics, that I'm better off economically than I was before. Once you've hit that, everyone will follow.
To frame this as an either or choice is a lost bet. To say, hey, do you want to save water or your livelihoods? Of course, the answer is that livelihoods. And the second thing that you said, which I think is often missed in conversations around water, is that you can't just give them advice on the water choice that they have to make. You have to tie this all the way to the actual realization of the livelihood outcome. Be it market value chains, be it FPOs, inputs that they might have to receive, pricing, all of that stuff as well, which is very, very critical. How do they experience data, and how do they actually engage with data? You talked about the water budgeting very briefly. Tell us a little bit more about that.
The starting point is nobody actually thinks about data on these kind of matters, especially in the village. So the first task or the challenge is to have that conversation that, look, what on earth is data and why should I be bothered about it? It rains, the water, that pond fills up and that well fills up. It's been happening for generations. Why is there a need to know how much there is?
Right.
So the principle of measurement, we start with, okay, this is a farm pond, or it's any small water body in your village. We ask the group, tell us, how much water do you think there would be? And each one comes up with some kind of a guess in some denomination. You say, okay, let's see if we validate it. And then you realize, wow, I thought there was more, or this is what it was. That's the first time that they realize that what they see may not be what is the reality. What they've always thought was X quantity may actually be very vastly different. Then it almost becomes a little bit of a game.
Right.
So that is the first part, which to say, almost think of it like on the asset side, this is the amount, the quantum of the water asset that I have available to me at a point in time. And later, when we do more advancing, how much do you think water is likely to come in? So much is coming to come through rainfall. There's some another seasonal thing which is flowing through. What is the total quantum that you have? And then we start working on the flip side. What do you use the water for? And start with the most innocent level of water, that how much water do you drink and how much do you need for your livestock and so on. And then you move to how much do you need for your kitchen garden, and then how much do you need for your core fields. And the moment it starts, and in most cases it happens, it shows that, look, these two are not in balance. What you need for your is maybe a little more than what, or significantly more than what you have. And that's the principle of the gap. Once it comes in, I think 90% of the problem is sorted out. Then it becomes more about, how do I bring these two in balance? Therefore, how do I increase my supply side of it, and how do I reduce the demand side of it? This everyone understands very quickly and very closely, that these two finally have to match. So I've been to villages where you have these women who have been trained, and then they have their water budgets of their villages, with charts, with numbers, with facts. And when you try to poke questions and doubts on them, you get back pretty strong replies. That, look, I have measured it. I know this is so it's measured. It is not, it's not just a casual number, it's an estimation. I also realize I need to keep it in balance. So many of those messages come across very strongly, and the amount of respect, and in most cases, since it's women, the amount of respect they get from the rest of the village, including the men folk, that she knows and she's done it. She's the authority on water in our village. That's a huge shift in their social respect and standing. The most difficult step is, of course, step number one. Getting people into, why should you even do it? We've never done it in the past, and so on. But once we are through that barrier, the rest of it normally progresses. And thanks to the support, a lot of our partner NGOs, etc., they've done yeoman service, and we've exchanged best practices amongst them. How do we get this principle of numeracy involved, etc.? It works. It's working, and it's working well, and I only see it going stronger in that direction.
Excellent. And Shraman, you touched upon a whole bunch of things which I think are critical, but if you can to enumerate, what is critical for this process to happen? One, as you rightly mentioned, a local non-profit organization that has the trust of the community and the capability. Second is the emergence of data and apps, for example, that can be used. But if you had to sort of summarize, what are some of those catalytic inputs that both catalyze this process and sustain this process in the long run?
See, the second part, the answer is easier. It has to make more money for everyone through the chain. If I can manage my resources better, if I can be more reliable with my crops, if I can earn more money by adopting good practices, so I'm better off at the end of the day. If I'm better off, I will do it. It's human nature. If you're better off, you will continue following a practice which is better off. The starting point is the more difficult part. That, look, there is a need to move from status quo, and if you move from status quo, you actually get better off. And this is where, in addition to the little bit or significant work that the not-for-profit does, the use of demonstration plots is very, very vital. You have to show it to me. You have to show it to me. Whether on the same plot I can have two-tiered farming. You can have bamboos and so on. You can grow crops while you have something else at the seed. Or in this season, this crop can be grown with very little water. At the end of the day, once you are able to cross over some of those boundaries and show that these are not unsurmountable, the proof of success, everyone then follows a successful practice. That is relatively the easier part. At times, we witness some wonderful collective action which comes from traditional practices. And I'll give you one example. In the Bhil tribe in central India, there's an old established practice of Halma. Halma is people getting together for a common need or a cause, and it could be even an individual cause. But if you need that support, okay, we will lend our shoulders to it, we will come together and do it. So there was an instance of a very large water body which was enough for 5 or 6 villages which had developed a breach. And for some reason or the other, that was not getting repaired, and therefore the water was not getting stored in. So you had this set of women who moved through the Gram Panchayat, took advantage of the support from Manrega and so on, but then getting the people together that, look, if we fill this breach, then our water needs, we are secure for the next couple of years. And they knew exactly how much water they were losing and how much would get if that breach was filled. And they got together and they did that by themselves. So they understand it very well that my welfare goes beyond my immediate today. Some of these old practices, when they come in, it's actually fabulous to see that, look, it's possible, and it didn't take all that long, and suddenly we are all water secure. It was my problem, your problem, yet it was no one's problem, and together once we made it ours, we were able to do that.
Yeah, this is the classical tragedy of the commons that people talk about as well, saying how do you sort of make it everybody's problem? And it also speaks to me that, a lot of our thinking, when it comes from a Western mindset, thinks of the individual. For them, the collective model of working is already built in. And they have collective structures that are traditionally there, and oftentimes we disrupt it by taking an individualistic approach to solving these problems as well. One of the things I wanted to understand from you, Shraman, was also that what data specifically, right? Are there parts where you feel like, hey, I wish this data was also available for us to engage, or is there sufficient data today to engage these conversations, or the sufficient technologies and tools that provide the right data that the communities need?
There's actually sufficient data, especially now so it's a matter of using data which might be GIS and remote sensing, but ground truthing it.
Right.
So it has to work in tandem. At the Gram Panchayat level, maps and data for almost everything is available. It's a question of knowing which one do you need, which one do you pull out, maybe revalidating it. Right. So that a lot of the data for commons, etc., it's in the public domain and it is available. And the government has done some heroic works over the last few years. One has been just a census of all the water bodies in the country. Census, it's not a sample.
Right.
Which was published, and that also shows which are the ones which are full, which are partly encroached, which are fully encroached. But now that is published data available, which you can analyze at a block level, at a district level. So you have a starting base of data.
Correct.
Many places have rain gauges which are actually functioning. Lot of the other tools that are used, for example, again, an FES developed tool called the CLART tool that is extremely effective. Once villagers also realize that, look, this is how the well measurements are taken and I take it at this periodicity and this is how I record it, it starts telling its own story. So very often the solutions are not overly complex. You start simple and then people find their own ways to improve it. I have been to fields where the amount of watering, so you have those flow meters kind of thing so that you can measure at how much do I need and you take only that much and the rest of it passes through. We spoke briefly about technology and things like IoT sensors. Why do you irrigate, for example? It's only because you need an optimal amount of soil moisture at a particular time for a particular type of soil. More than that is actually doing harm because it's washing away nutrients and so on. And less than that is suboptimal.
Correct.
So the first generation of IoT things which was started was that, okay, it's measured in the field and it sends an SMS to you, hey, it's drying up, please switch on the motor.
Right.
And okay, it's enough now, switch it off. Human beings are lazy. So now, one step more, it'll automatically switch on your motor and it'll switch it off. And with the startup community, etc., which are the ones where all these bright spots, once they're aware of what are the issues to be solved,
right,
there are so many of these coming in.
And I think what you're also saying is that there is entrepreneurial energy, there is new technology innovations, etc., that are coming in. Because one of the things I'm also noticing is that data is getting a lot more democratic. We're not waiting for a one source of truth to tell us what the data is, but distributing the access and availability of data across a wide range of stakeholders, because they today have drones, they have the IoT sensors, they have some of these little tools that have been used which are low touch, low fi, but still work very effectively and so on. And your experience tells us that all of this is actually happening on the ground.
Yes, and there are celebrities which are being created in the farming communities. The women, when they've cracked it, you have her and she's an Instagram reel. The people are making YouTube videos out of it, and who doesn't like being popular?
Wow. And I think this is a new tone of social change, right? This tone of social change often is not communicated enough, which is actually embracing the realities of today and creating value in other ways than what you would imagine sitting in a room otherwise.
I'm amazed at how much they know about climate change across communities, across the whole country. Everyone knows about it. And since we are talking about water, I think one thing that the Indian languages have got perfectly right is the simple transliteration of climate change. Jal, Vayu, Parivartan. Water is changing, air is changing. Water they can see. Delhi, you're here in Delhi today, so air requires not much thing to talk about. But it hits the nail on the head. And they say, look, it wasn't like this before.
That sort of brings me to the next question. Is today there is a reality that you're seeing in the community. There is also the reality that philanthropists are working with. And sometimes even non-profits are working with as well. And they may not be actually in sync. And there are diverse types of stakeholders looking at the same problem differently. Is there a need to even align what success looks like, not for the community because they seem to be aligned on it, but to the ecosystem that's enabling these communities to be better?
Indeed. And one of the steps that we've taken has been trying to get parts of the funding community together and exchange views. For example, one of a large part of what we've talked about basically is in the area of behavior change.
That's right.
And behavior change for whom? For every single stakeholder, from public representatives, government representatives, funders, not-for-profit part, and everyone. So each one has a starting position, as you rightly point out, based on our understanding, beliefs, and so on. And famously, it's been said that the only thing which ever likes a change is a baby which has wet its nappies. Otherwise, this is what you know. This is the stable situation. This is how things go. So to identify for each one, what are some of the intuitive barriers to change? What are the things that are holding them back from bringing about change is an important bit to understand. Then what could be some of the tools to change? To thinking about that, because it requires conviction, because nobody wants to be worse off.
Right.
Who will take the risk? We were pleasantly surprised at how many funders, for example, were thinking about roughly the same set of things. And since we are not competitive, we are all collaborative. One of the thoughts was, can we put some of our best practices together in terms of how we identify it and how do we move further along this journey of behavior change? Because only then can it sustain in a long period of time.
That's right.
The worst situation we could land up in was to solve the supply side of water, have more, but also expend more.
Yeah.
That it's only going to make the situation a little worse, if anything. So to balancing it on both sides becomes a critical factor, which is what some of our behavior change activities and thoughts have been on, and getting the wider set of people together.
Yeah.
We found the government to be very supportive at all levels. They have a very sharp perspective on what some of these issues are, the scale at which it has been sorted out. They've also been very appreciative of the support by the not-for-profit and organizations like ours which support the not-for-profit of our work in getting the community together.
Yeah.
And I think most critical in this, if you ask me, the single biggest enabler is for each one to have the ability to listen and listen with big ears to what the others have to say, and start with the premise that nobody is wrong.
Of course.
They all have, they are seeing it from a different angle, but they are all very much in the right space.
Two follow-up questions there, Shraman. One is, at least in the philanthropy world, what you measure becomes a way of aligning the agenda, the outcomes, etc. as well. Is there a need to align on, let's say, a common set of outcome indicators, impact indicators around water that will make this cohesion of purpose a little bit more easier for us to achieve?
Indeed, indeed, and there can be no disagreement about that. And we did try to make a step forward, and we had supported a fairly rigorous study involving all kind of stakeholders through the institution called Wells Labs, and they came up with a report called the Wiser report. And fundamentally, it was, look, how are we going to measure the issues around, and can we come to a common vocabulary that can be used? So when we all speak, we can speak about a particular thing. The balance between being simple and being simplistic is vital. So we would like to have some simple enough metrics, but making sure that it's not so simplistic that it loses relevance, but that would indeed make a big difference in getting. And there are multiple stakeholders in the broader defined water sector, but just to have slightly more common conversations, even to understand and appreciate others' viewpoints is vital, and that would be a significant step forward.
Second question to follow up on that is also that I have now realized that unless we bring industry, government, civil society, and the community together, this problem cannot be solved, right? Otherwise, it's the Devon's paradox thing. The more efficient you make this, the more the utilization actually grows. Sometimes I wonder, what is the structural model that will enable this? Sometimes I've heard people say, place as a model. Let's say take a sub-basin, river basin, or a location to do this. Some people have looked at it as a value chain to say, okay, sugarcane industry, communities, etc. will do this, etc. Sometimes it's anchored by government, and the government convenes a set of stakeholders to do this. Are there collaboration models that you think will work effectively for us to solve this problem, but also gives us a chance to ensure that the voice and the agency of the community is maintained as part of this collaboration, as well as we bring all of these stakeholders together?
Complex question. The answer obviously is yes. I mean, without a collaborative approach, there could be no. I'm not sure whether we could even have a solution. We are probably talking of managing the situation right now. That try to avoid it from getting out of hand, and control the situation, and then solving maybe a lifetime away for all we know. But even for us to manage the solution, different geographies and different segments have identified their issues rather differently, and the lead stakeholders may be different. Again, it's a fine balance to which I don't have a ready answer between who should be a lead stakeholder and who should be a subsidiary stakeholder. So, because there are many, and government itself is multi-tiered. So, and if you look at how water resources are seen from a constitutional framework, there are very few things which lie with the central government. Significantly more is at the on the concurring list between the center and the state. Bulk of the water bit is at the state level, and there's a lot more devolved down to local government. Structurally, for now, at least we have a Jal Shakti ministry which looks at water from all its perspectives at one level. So at least you have a big picture approach to it. When we talk about a lot of this, let us not lose sight of places like the hill states, where their issues are completely different. A snowless winter or too much of rain instead of snow, precipitation is the same. That can have a different set of issues, and will have different kind of solutions. So we may need to look at micro and macro solutions simultaneously, and somewhere along the line that some of these things will have to come together. I don't think we are in a situation where we can only solve at very large levels and wait for it to trickle down. So there have to be solutions which have to be found given the criticality of where we are with the issues of water security, have to start at almost the household and the village and the hamlet level, and work in some kind of sync that the bigger issues also get layered in. So yes, certainly should we think river basin? Of course we should think river basin, but what is the size of a river basin? How many other states? Each river flows through 5 different states in different stages of a river's evolution. You are a man from Bangalore. So every year, depending on how the rains go, the states of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, their whether they are the best of friends or they are not,
Worst of enemies.
or you've sent me too much water, you're not sending me enough water. And that's the state even in inter-country
Disputes,
issues are the same. There's so many layers to it. I mean, if you look at the Middle East, the famous the Jordan River, if you looked at it, it's not even at parts 6 feet to 10 feet wide. And there are multiple countries which are struggling, because in that stretch, that is the only perennial source of water. So there are multiple stakeholders, no one solution, no one is the one with all the right answers. The Prime Minister just a year back, amongst his 10 resolutions, the number one was water security, and all the things that have been started off in terms of reviving water bodies, at least bringing the discussion, stop the rain where it falls. There's so many of these initiatives. At least they have brought water into discourse, public discourse. Things like the Atal Bhujal Yojana, which is purely on groundwater. It's a World Bank supported scheme, and Bhujal is literally ground water. But I heard a term in the villages of UP which was even better. They called it Bhugarbh Jal. Garbh is womb. So from the womb of the earth, water from the womb of the earth. So you are looking at how much should you extract? How do you recharge? So you're looking at it more holistically, realizing that 100% U-turn on habits is not likely to happen. But at least some of these realities are being factored in. I think that is a big step forward that has happened.
Shraman, as you speak, one thought that comes to me is that a lot of it is going well. There is momentum, there is technology, there is data. But we also know that we are far away from solving this at scale. The problems, as you rightly said about Kurukshetra, is actually going 1 meter down every year rather than 1 meter up. What is stopping us from solving this at scale?
A long, hard drought. When things really go bad, that is when everyone gets spurred into action. Right now, till you think that I'm okay, I can get away with it, you won't lend your shoulders fully to it. And we've seen that in many parts of the world, where it presses the button in a very acute way. But for the rest of it, only that will precipitate an immediate action. However, if I believe that if we are gradually moving in the direction and with a collective acceptance of what it takes, I think we will still get there. Maybe at 20 kilometers an hour, but it's better to reach at 20 kilometers an hour than to press the pedal at 100 and have a crash.
And my own learning also, having worked now with multiple stakeholders, is that we often imagine collaboration as common agenda, very coordinated action. Then the question of who's above, who's below, who works. How can we have common agenda, independent action? Which is that all of us align on the agenda, we all have our measurements, but our actions are independent, aligned to the larger objective. I think even that is extremely powerful, especially in the case of water. I feel a common agenda, independent action model where all of us are seeing the same truth, but are acting in our capacities, in our context, in the most effective way, I think might be a very useful way of collaboration as well.
It would be. In fact, I'll be happy to invite you to visit some of our program sites and maybe offer your suggestions once you observe what's happening. Because even if you were to look at the corporate foundations or some of the CSR activities of different corporates, there's some very good work which is being done. And while there is certain degree of collaboration and sharing of ideas, whether this is something that a neutral party like you could help facilitate, that best practices move across a little faster, we'll be very grateful. And I'm sure that some of the women in the villages could take a very advanced class for you on water budgeting as well. And
I can't wait for a session like that, Shraman.
You're welcome. The sooner you come, the better.
Absolutely. I'm going to honestly take you on that invitation. And on that note, thank you so much for being with us today. It has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I learned a lot through this conversation. I hope the audiences did as well.
Thank you so much, Rathish, for provoking this conversation on this very, very vital subject which everyone needs to talk a lot more about, listen a lot more about, and the solutions will emerge on their own. Thank you so much for having me.